welcome to this first one since we did 4 webinars in the sort of on the January transfer window, talking about transfers, the market. Unfortunately for us, we didn't have the busiest January ever, but still, we just thought, look, it's a good thing to keep abreast of what's happening in the business. It's a way of sort of connecting with our audience as well. And, I think talking about transfers and looking ahead to the summer is a really useful thing for whether you're at a club, at a football agency, or you're in that sort of marketplace. So as ever, I'm joined by Pete O'Rourke, Footy Insider. How are you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm good, Tony. A bit quieter now. Now the European transfer window is closed. As you said, January was a bit of a slow burner, but I think that will be a precursor for a busy summer. Obviously, there'll be new clubs in different leagues and everything else, and there'll be better budgets, I think, that clubs can work with to try and bring in more players. And we know the summer transfer window is the best window if you are going to do business. So that's why many of the big boys kept their powder dry in January, probably waiting for that summer to land their top targets and improve and strengthen their squad. So yeah, expecting a busy summer.
And I mean, after the window closed in Europe, which was generally the 1st of Feb, around about that date, in most countries, there was still a few deals that got done after, wasn't there, Pete?
Yeah, still a few deals that managed to get done and over the line, obviously, to different territories. The Turkish window was open for another week after the English and most of the European window. So there was a few moves out to Turkey as well. One of the bigger ones as well was Jesse Lingard moving to South Korea after the transfer window. He could do that being a free agent. So he's made the big surprise move to go out there and on a 2-year deal as well. Made his debut the other day. I don't think it went so well for him. He was even getting booed by the crowd. So it'll be interesting to see how long Jesse lasts out there as well. But
where's he? In Korea? Did he go to Korea?
Yeah, he's gone to Korea, Seoul
Korea.
FC. So yeah, big signing for them. And
Yeah.
as I said, brave move by Jesse Lingard to, I presume he's turned down offers from other clubs across Europe to make that move to South Korea. So it's a new culture, new challenge for him. Probably the most high-profile transfer in recent days. Tony's probably Leila Abada from Celtic is close to joining Charlotte FC in MLS. Obviously, Abada was a big signing for Celtic a couple of years ago and really impressed under Ange Postecoglou. Not really worked out for him recently. Under Brendan Rodgers, there's been a few issues off the field as well, coming on for some criticism from some Celtic fans as well. So I think it's a parting of the ways, which suits all parties really. And Celtic are getting a really good fee for the Israel international as well, close to £10 million. So
What was that? How much it was? 10 million.
Yeah, I think it won't be all up front, £10 million, but I think for Celtic they signed him for 2.5 million a couple of years ago, so it's a big profit for them. So yeah, it makes sense for them. Obviously, he will be missed between now and the end of the season, and maybe Celtic might need him for this title running. But it seems Brendan Rodgers is ready to sacrifice him, and the player himself is up for this move to Charlotte AFC, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on out in America with probably one of the other transfers that slipped through the net after the window closed was Matt Crooks from Middlesbrough heading out to the MLS as well. So obviously very attractive to move to America. Obviously you've got Lionel Messi out there now as well with Inter Miami, really raising the profile and the exposure of MLS as well. So I think for any player now, the MLS is probably a lot more appealing than it used to be.
And I think lifestyle as well, if you've got an option to go to maybe Saudi or maybe go to the USA, which one would you go for, Pete?
Well, it depends what gets you motivated, Tony. If you're looking probably the money, there'll be more money on offer from the Saudi Pro League. But as you said, the MLS, I think, is a up and coming league. It's really garnering a lot of attention now because of Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, Sergio Busquets, all at Inter Miami. Who would have thought that a few years ago that those Barcelona legends will be flying their trade in MLS? So yeah, lifestyle as well in America, I'm sure would appeal to a lot of players as well. So I wouldn't say no to either, Tony, if I had the chance.
It's almost like Barcelona legends team in Sevilla. You got the legends. Maybe Guardiola can turn up there.
Right. Who knows?
I might be able to do that deal. No, that's great, Pete. But look, from an agent's point of view, players can move at any time, but there has to be a window open for them to move into. So, clubs obviously don't want to let players go, particularly when they've got the squad set. But if there's a window open and you want to go there, then America's still open. I think I've just got that date down. I think it's the 23rd of April that finishes the American transfer window. Brazil, most players come out of Brazil to other countries, but if you wanted to go to Brazil, they close tomorrow. So if you look on FIFA's website about the registration periods, it's in with the TMS stuff on FIFA. You'll find all of the registration periods for whatever country is under the FIFA banner, and they all have a lot of them have quite different ones. So we've talked about transfers, Pete. Should we talk about PSR, or its profit and sustainability rules, isn't it? It's FTF, but with different initials, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
What's been happening with that?
Well, probably the big news regarding PSR, Tony, it was last week's news that Everton had their 10-point reduction reduced to 6 after a successful appeal. Obviously, we know that Everton did have a second charge hanging over them, which was dished out by the Premier League in January of this year as well. So they probably could face another 6-point deduction in the worst case scenario for that breach. Obviously, we will have that hearing later this year. I think we'll definitely have it before the end of the season, and I think that makes total sense because I think every club needs to know what's going on with Everton and Nottingham Forest, who were also charged with a breach of FFP and PSR. So both of those clubs, I think, will probably find out the chart, whatever the points deduction that they might face. I'm guessing around April's time. It's looking like, so just a month away. I'm sure both clubs will probably appeal it as well once they do get whatever charge they do get as well. So that's been the big talk in the PSR, which is now it's a thing that's not going to go away from football anytime soon. It's going to be crucial going forward that clubs have their house in order. Otherwise, they do run the risk of a points deduction.
So Everton and Forest could face further points this season, or will there be points next season, Pete?
Well, I think it could be this season. I think obviously they're trying to fast track it now because we've obviously had issues in the past when teams have been relegated, and they would then question why wasn't the points deduction made during the season, which might have ensured that they stayed in the league. So I think for the good of the game, I think we really do need those charges and any points deductions made before the end of the season. And all likelihood is it is looking like April that we will find out if Everton and Forest are handed points deductions. Obviously, the 10 points that Everton were handed was the biggest punishment ever in English football as well. So Everton were pretty confident with their appeal, and they did get it reduced to 6 points on that appeal. So it was an extra 4 points on the board for Sean Dyche's side, which has lifted them 5 points clear of that relegation drop zone right now as well. But if they were to get, say, a 6-point deduction, it'll put them right back right in the mire. And obviously, I think they need to know a resolution of what's going on so they can try and focus between now and the end of the season to see if they can secure Premier League survival.
But if you find out in April, it only gives you half a dozen games to make it right. You might need to win the last 3 games to stay up or whatever it is. I don't know. That it's a bit tight. To be honest, Pete, it reminds me of my speeding fines, the penalty points I get. If I could appeal them and get a reduction, I'd be quite happy. Leicester, what about Leicester? I think they've. I mean, Leicester obviously went down. They were running away with the championship until the sort of last month when it sort of wobbled a bit. They won last night, didn't they? Who did they beat last night? It was Sunderland away from home.
They beat Sunderland 1-0, yeah, to end a run of 3 straight defeats. But really, it's got really tied up now at the top end of the championship. You've got Ipswich, who had a sticky run maybe about a month ago, but they've found form again. They're just 3 points behind Leicester now. And then you've got Leeds, who've probably been the form team in the championship now, and they're just 5 points behind the leaders and going really strongly under Daniel Farke as well. But yeah, the latest reports coming out suggest that Leicester could be the latest club facing a potential points deduction for breaching PSR rules. Some rivals are questioning if Leicester broke the top flight rule of a 105 million limit of losses over a 3-year period when they were in the Premier League last year. So obviously a lot of clubs have all released their latest accounts. Leicester have yet to release their accounts ending 2023, which was when they were in the Premier League. So it's going to be an interesting one. A lot of obviously question marks are being asked. Why haven't Leicester released those accounts just yet? Maybe they are fearing the worst and expecting something could happen. But then if they were to win promotion back to the Premier League this season at the first time of asking, that could be a potential loophole in them avoiding the points deduction as well. So lots of
Yeah.
doubts surrounding all this as well. And obviously Leicester will point to the fact that when they got relegated last season, they did raise a lot of money from the sales of the likes of James Maddison, Harvey Barnes,
Mm,
Timothy Castagna all went, and obviously they cut their cloth accordingly. But I think
yeah.
it was pretty evident looking at the January transfer window, Leicester couldn't really do much. They weren't able to spend because they're right on the fringes of FFP, and it's going to be interesting when those accounts do finally get released.
Yeah, and I was looking. I saw Villa because a lot of the clubs are producing their results at the moment, and it's unusual for football fans. I know Kieran Maguire, who's a good friend of the Transfer Forum. He has opened the Pandora's box of football finance, and everyone's interested in it. But now, when I'm starting to look and go, oh, Aston Villa have lost nearly 120 million.
Yeah,
Hang on, that. And then I don't really understand all the ins and outs of the loopholes and the finances and what's allowed and what isn't allowed. But you look at that headline figure and you think, well, I thought it was supposed to be 105 million over 3 years, and they've just lost 120 million. What's going on at Villa?
yeah, big alarm bells ringing. I would say if you're connected with Aston Villa to report those losses of, as you said, close to 120 million in just 1 year, but their club claim that they're continuing to operate within the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. They say obviously a lot of that money has been used on the academy and also the women's team and other charitable donations as well. But we know
Yeah,
Villa, the
yeah,
wage bill has soared as well pretty highly in recent seasons. So that's obviously going to contribute to these losses as well. I think, as you said, if you're talking of 105 million losses over a 3 year period, Villa have outstripped that in 1 year with the 120 million. So got to be concerning
wow.
for Villa. And I don't think it's any surprise to see what Villa did in the summer transfer window. They were selling homegrown players for pure profit.
Ah,
You
yeah.
saw,
This thing about pure profit, Pete. So it doesn't go. It just goes into your account straight away. You're not paying it over a few years, and it really balances up the financial situation.
it's a loophole that clubs are using to try and get
Yeah,
their
yeah,
house in order and balance the books as well.
yeah,
Obviously, Villa sold Cameron Archer to Sheffield United in the summer. Aaron Ramsey joined Burnley.
yeah.
Jaden Philogene went to Hull as well. So this let
He's doing
three,
he's doing well at Hull, isn't he?
yeah,
He's doing
done
really
done
well.
very well at Hull. A few Villa fans probably questioning why did we let him go, but I think it
Mm,
was due to financial reasons why he left. And obviously, there's a few rumours in the January window that Jacob Ramsey could even be sacrificed
right.
because again, another homegrown player would
Yeah,
bring pure profit if he was to be sold. So
yeah.
it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Jacob Ramsey
And
in the summer transfer window and what Villa are going to do to try and balance the books because
yeah.
can't really sustain this going forward.
And of course, the Jack Grealish move, which was it 2 seasons ago now, Pete?
2 seasons ago now, yeah.
Yeah, so the Jack Grealish move for about 100 million, as it was reported. Look, these figures are always reported as higher with the add-ons and everything else, so you can probably knock 30% off those sort of figures. But still, it was that 100 million. It'll be in that 3 year set of accounts, or there'll be another payment coming along the line this shortly. So that might offset some of it for Villa, but I don't, I really don't like this getting into um, the accountants and the lawyers are sort of deciding what's happening in the football sphere, and young players at good clubs like Villa. Why
Yeah.
should you have to move if you're happy where you are and you might be starting or whatever, and a bid comes in for you? Yeah, it's attractive, but it shouldn't be the be all and end all that we need to balance our finances, so off you go. That can't be right, can it?
No, definitely not. You got to feel for the players in some respect in that one. Cameron
Yeah,
Archer obviously went to Sheffield United. He could be playing in the Championship next season, the way things are looking right now. Same with Aaron Ramsey, who went to Burnley.
yeah,
He could be in the Championship next season as well.
yeah.
Obviously, Jaden Philogene did step down and move to Hull and play in the Championship and has done
Mm,
really well. But what these clubs are going to have to do now, Tony, they're obviously looking to sign top players, and they are going to use the homegrown status of players to try and bring in maximum profit, which we keep hearing away from Aston Villa. Chelsea, what they're going to do with Conor Gallagher, who for me has probably been their best player this season, but
yeah,
still no nearer signing a new contract, and the club are open to sacrificing Conor Gallagher to ensure that they get maximum pure profit from his sale because he is a homegrown player. So it leaves a lot of fans scratching their heads, thinking, why would we let arguably our best player this season go? But it's to balance the books, and make sure that they don't fall foul of PSR and FFP regulations.
Yeah, and let's segue into talking about Liverpool, Pete, because they made I think it was a 7 million loss, wasn't it? Liverpool,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
Which
7
is
million.
that sounds like very, very good. You know, if you're not, and let's face it, a lot of these Premier League clubs aren't looking to make a profit, are they really? In you know, in business terms, a lot of them are loss making because they want to be loss making because they want to be at the top of the league. So, Liverpool, what's the situation with? What have you heard about Liverpool? Because obviously we know Klopp's going.
Yeah.
We know they need a new sporting director and a head coach. What have you been hearing about Liverpool?
Yeah, it's going to be a summer of change at Liverpool. There's no doubts about that with Jurgen Klopp stepping down at the end of the season. So that managerial hunt is ongoing right now as well. And obviously, a sporting director is another
Mm,
role that they need to fill. That's probably the priority right now to try and get the right man in for that role. And then after that, that new man, whoever the sporting director is going to be, will have a major say on who will be Jurgen Klopp's replacement at Anfield as well.
yeah,
Richard Hughes at Bournemouth seems to be the top target, maybe to fill that role. He has announced just recently that he will be stepping down as technical director at Bournemouth at the end of the season. It's been ongoing for a while. This one that Richard Hughes will be leading, but very shrewd operator. Richard Hughes, he's been in that role for over 10 years now at Bournemouth and
mm,
done a very impressive job on a pretty small budget, really, when you compare it to the other teams in the Premier League. He's had some success in the transfer market, bringing in players relatively cheap and then selling them on for huge fees for big profit as well. And then there's the ongoing rumours that Michael Edwards might go back to Liverpool as well in some all-encompassing
yeah. Oh,
recruitment role, whether
mm,
that's as a chief executive or head of football operations. We're still waiting to see what happens, but I think Liverpool's owners, Fenwick Sports Group, would love the opportunity of bringing back Michael Edwards back to the club. Obviously, he was a major part of the success under Jurgen Klopp. Liverpool
yeah,
were rightly lauded as one of the masters of the transfer window and what they'd done, and with the signings of the likes of Virgil van Dijk, Alisson, Mohamed Salah as well. It's really been the bedrock from that Liverpool squad, and which has obviously helped them go on and have success as well. So
yeah,
I think Liverpool really want to get that sporting director role filled as soon as possible, and it will be a big job because this will be Liverpool's fourth sporting director in under 3 years. So there's been a bit of upheaval there at Anfield
mm,
since Michael Edwards departed. Julian Ward then didn't last very long. Jörg Schmackda was just a short-term appointment, and now they are looking for a permanent sporting director to come this summer.
yeah. It's interesting. Rich Hughes came from Portsmouth to
Yep.
Bournemouth because he actually came to the transfer forum. I can't remember which one it was, but when he was had his Portsmouth hat on, he came to the football transfer forum, and hopefully he'll come back for the next one. But with his Bournemouth links, what do you think about the situation at Newcastle with their sporting? We'll talk about Dan Ashworth in a bit, but you mentioned Rich Hughes.
Yeah.
I don't know whether his time at Bournemouth ever had any links or he's got any links with Eddie Howe, but is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's a real possibility. Obviously, Newcastle are in the hunt for a new sporting director as well, with Dan Ashworth on gardening leave right now before his move to Manchester United, which I do fully expect
Yeah.
get ratified and resolved at some point soon. I don't think it's doing anybody any favors with Ashworth on gardening leave. He must have a big garden. That's all I'll say, if that's what's going on. But
You can come and do my garden. Honestly,
uh,
I think I need a bit. This gardening leave. It must be like I think that's paradise. You're getting well paid, and you're not under any pressure. You can just go and relax and just listen. You sort out the deal. You know, I think Dan probably needs a good agent. You don't know anyone, do you? Who could? No, but just
I'm
you
sure.
sort out the deal, and
Yeah,
I'll just sit here waiting, and obviously um, he'll probably have time to sort of look at what he wants and what he thinks about the new club, and that'll probably benefit United in the long run. Um, the 20 million though, that was a figure. I mean, look, as an agent, I think 20 million for Dan Ashworth's not bad business because he only needs to sign one Moses
yeah.
Caicedo, and you've got your money back fourfold. Do you know what I mean? In
Oh,
that,
100%.
and for me, superstar head coaches, superstar sporting directors, are almost as effective as superstar strikers. So I know people will probably shout me down, but you know, I mean, I don't think they'll pay 20 million. But what do you think about that? I mean, look, it's a transfer. It's a transfer,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
it?
No, it's a big money involved in that one. I think for any successful club, you've got to have the structure right off the pitch before you can get it right on the pitch. And there's no doubts that Dan Ashworth is a very highly rated operator in the football recruitment. Done an unbelievable job at Brighton. Was making progress at Newcastle as well. I'm sure Newcastle ideally would have wanted to keep him around for longer so he could continue his work at St James's Park
Mm,
alongside Eddie Howe as well. So big loss to Newcastle, but it's just the going rate now. I think these days you're going to have sporting directors in demand just as much as players. And as you said, Tony, Dan Ashworth, once he does get his feet under the table at Old Trafford, if he identifies top talents to come in and have a major impact at Manchester United and they potentially sell them on in the future, he pays for himself and pays for a lot more. I think Dan Ashworth and what he can
absolutely.
bring to the club, and if
Yeah.
he can get United back to challenging and winning honours, it's a smart investment from Manchester United. Whether it's £20 million or 10, I think we're probably talking. I don't think it'll be as high as 20. I think the two clubs will come to a compromise, and I think a deal could probably be ironed out for around the £10 million mark. And as I said, for getting somebody as highly rated as Dan Ashworth, it makes good business sense for Manchester United.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned Rich Hughes as a potential successor for Dan at Newcastle. Um, is there anyone else who springs to mind for you? If like let's assume Michael Edwards is potentially going back to Liverpool or whatever, is there anybody else who springs to mind who you think? Because for me, I think it's quite a tricky scenario to follow Dan in as the in the Newcastle. I think Eddie Howe's in a strong position because he's done really well with the players that he's got. It's also, you look, they didn't do any business in January because of um, PSR,
Yeah.
and the academy needs improving. Although they've got a couple of kids come through, Lewis Miley and Elliot Anderson have come through from the academy, which is great news for the club in financial terms and in playing terms, and just feel good terms around the club. But because I sort of feel like it's probably more suitable to an old head at this moment in time, not somebody. And look, it's a big club, isn't it? It's a massive club.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on replacing Dan at Newcastle?
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy job to replace him. That's why I don't think Newcastle are in any real rush right now to make a decision on what they do. I think Steve Nixon, who's chief scout there, very highly rated. I think he's going to hold the reins for now, and he probably
Mm,
will take care of the summer transfer window before Newcastle do make a final decision on what they do with the structure of the recruitment team as well. As you said, Michael Edwards, I'm sure, will be in that conversation
mm,
if they are looking to bring in a high profile name, but it does seem he's quite happy doing what he's doing right now, working on his own consultancy business as well.
mm,
There's also Tiago Pinto, who's formerly of Roma, very highly rated technical director as well. There's been talk that he could potentially come to England and the Premier League as well. He's been linked with Spurs in the past as well. Frederick Massara, ex-AC Milan, also very highly regarded in recruitment circles as well. There's been talk that he could be on the list of a number of Premier League clubs as well, looking to fill that sporting
mm,
director role, Liverpool being one of them as well. And as you said, there could be a potential Richard Hughes, who has really close
mm.
link to Eddie Howe, who's worked with him during their time together at Bournemouth and do have a close friendship as well. But whether Newcastle would move for Richard Hughes, I'm not too sure just yet. It does seem that maybe he has got something agreed already, and it does seem that all signs do point to Liverpool for Richard Hughes to move to Anfield.
Really? Wow, that's interesting. I mean, there's a couple of people that I sort of think would be great for Newcastle, and it's no information that I'm privy to. It's just my sort of gut feeling. One of them is Les Ferdinand. Les had a really tough time at QPR, but he's a great man, and he's,
Newcastle legend as well.
yeah, the fans, and I think because he's been a successful ex-player, Eddie Howe and the boys will warm to him, and I've he's been on one of our webinars and he was absolutely superb. And I don't know all the ins and outs of what happened at QPR, but he would be like for me quite high up on the list. Maybe Steve Walsh, who was he probably one of the few sporting directors with a Premier League title in his CV when he was at Leicester. You know, Steve went to Everton as well, and now he's working at Charlotte. Actually, we mentioned Charlotte early on, but he knows the club, and he's that old wise head, you know. And I think just at this time, I don't think it's a job for a new person to come in terms of new. The Premier League's new to them. You mentioned a couple of the foreign sporting directors. The Premier League's new to them. The club's new to them. You know, I sort of think a little bit of stability. And the other one I would probably name check is Phil Giles down at Brentford, because Phil, for me, that, you know, he's been a big part of building that club into from League One right up to the Premier League, and the transfers. And he's he's from Newcastle, Phil, and he knows the club, and he knows the fan base. He's a fan himself. So those three for me would be interesting. I don't know whether you know, they'd even be on the agenda, but I don't know what the profile is that Darren Eales and the board are looking at. But it's interesting, and we'll sort of watch this space, won't we, Pete?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Newcastle do. And as I said, I don't think they're going to rush into anything just yet while Dan Ashworth is on garden leave. They think Steve Nixon is a trusted pair of hands to keep things ticking over right now as well. But it'll be a big job for whoever does get it. And obviously with the Saudi owners, the ambitions are really high there. So they'll want a high profile and a top name to take the club forward from what Dan Ashworth's done so far as well. So, yeah, if we're going to be talking about sporting directors as much as transfer targets, probably this summer, the way it's going, Tony.
Well, the transfer of sporting directors, it's an interesting market, isn't it? Because it is a bit of a merry-go-round. You know, if you know, Bournemouth will be in the market for a sporting director then now, and you know, there'll be lots of people who are flying the trade in, you know, the Championship and other divisions that sort of eyeing that Bournemouth slot, because they've. And I think Bournemouth have just had a good link up with Hibs as well. Brian McDermott, sporting director at Hibs, who was on the last football transfer forum at Newcastle. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as well. I hear you've had an interesting week yourself, Tony. You've been on your travels,
Yeah,
attending the IFA summit in Madrid
yeah,
regarding aging regulations. How did you find it?
yeah. It sounds a bit jet setty, you know, taking the boy out of Newcastle to Madrid. But I've been doing quite a lot of work myself and Ryan McKnight with the European Football Agents Association, and they've been really leading the challenge to FIFA's new agent regulations. So one, Madrid is I was quite impressed with Madrid. And it's a really nice city to visit. But the actual summit was really, really interesting from an agent's point of view. There was lots of good panelists, and Carol Coos, who spoke at the last couple of football transfer forums, she had a panel with two guys from FIFA on. The head of agents, Luis Villas Boas Perez, and he told me that actual Andres Villas-Boas is so Luis Villas-Boas is part of his wife's name's in there, and it's his wife's cousin, the coach. I thought it could have been his brother or something, but it wasn't. It was his wife. So, yeah, it was really informative. We talked about the legal challenges, because there's been about a dozen, Pete, legal challenges to FIFA's new football agent regulations. And it just appears to me like FIFA aren't really backing down. They're sort of, this is what we're doing. Everyone's got to be licensed. You know, they're sort of ignoring the fact that there's been 12 challenges, 11 of them successful. I think ballpark figure 12, don't quote me on that, in different territories. But the most interesting one, Pete, was, and we had the two guys, we had Leon Angel there from base, and we had Fari, I think his second name's Ekret, and he's from Wasserman, and they were part of the challenge that happened by there was four agencies that went to the FA and had a Rule K arbitration. And basically what's happened is the FA found in favour of the agents, and they've suspended most of the key points that people weren't happy about, like the service cap, like the client payers rule, like the dual rep rules. So they've been successful in challenging it in England. So, you know, we are sort of business as usual, if you like. You've still got to get your FA license, but we're more or less business as usual. Now, it's going to a higher court, the European Court of Justice. The football agents regs are going to be heard in maybe next year, and then FIFA are going to decide what to do. Well, in the meantime, we've got transfer windows and things, so the sort of meeting. I think it was good from FIFA's point of view. They heard there was lots of questions from the floor. There was it was very respectfully done, because I've been to meetings before where the FA have spoken and they get really awkward questions, and the people get a little bit not agitated about what the FA is saying, but it was very, very well done, this one in Madrid, and well done to the European Football Agents Association. And if anyone on the call is interested in that area, and it undoubtedly involves transfers. It's all about transfers. You've got to follow the European Football Agents Association, see what they're saying about certain rules and regs and the legal challenges, and that'll just keep you abreast of everything. But yeah, Madrid was good. So yeah, it's interesting summit, Pete.
Yeah, not a bad place to have a meeting, Tony, I suppose, or a summit. I think I can think of worse places. But on the whole agent regulations, obviously they made lots of changes just before the January transfer window, just to really upset things when people were preparing for that January transfer window as well. Are the big agencies worried at all now, Tony, that now player rep contracts have to be signed to an individual agent rather than the company? Now that seems a bit of a strange one. That was never the normal procedure years ago.
No, it's a really good point. And because FIFA have made a company can't sign a representation contract with a player, all of the big agencies had to write to their players, every single one of the players. So somebody like Stella's got a hell of a lot of players to write to and say, right, here's a new representation contract, and the agent assigned to you is this person. Right. So if you imagine that was getting done in early January, all of the different rules and regs and different amendments came through in a flurry of circulars over Christmas and the New Year, which nobody was happy with. It for me, because I'm an independent agent and it's always been in my name, it didn't affect me, that representation rule. But for the big agencies, it was an absolute ball ache, excuse the French. And they had to, like I say, write out to all the players, assign an agent to each player. And when players are in a big agency, there's a number of agents that sort of work with them and know the players. There'll be somebody at a game who's maybe a junior agent, or somebody at the contract negotiation who's maybe a senior agent, or there might be 2 or 3 agents. And then you've got the people who work in the media department and the commercial, and so the player will be used to seeing a different number of people, and he was probably signed by one particular agent, but that has to be now specified. And I think there was something about it's easier to sue a company than an individual. I think that was one of the lawyers said if a player if somebody legally wanted to go after an agent, it would be less beneficial than going after a company if you needed to get into litigation. But yeah, there's lots. It hasn't sort of ironed itself out yet, Pete. January was business as usual, and I've got to say the FA were really, really good in helping, making sure everything was right, and they were accepting. They've accepted most of the representation contracts, but they've reserved the right to come back at a later date and say, no, that needs to be voided in the representation contract, because there's certain clauses. We're getting into the legalities of it here, but they've just to make the system work in January, they've accepted the majority of representation contracts, but said, pending further FIFA actions against FIFA and the FAR document, we reserve the right to void clauses in those contracts.
Right, it's going to be an ongoing process, a bit like PSR and FFP. I think these FIFA agent regulations are constantly looking to chop and change. And if you said people are challenging them, how are they ever going to be nailed down of what the actual regulations are?
Well, a Brazilian agent said, look, we can't take the FIFA exam in Portuguese, right? $600 is a lot to a small agent in Brazil. There was one exam in Sao Paulo, and you might have to travel for a day, a couple of hotels, travel back, and it just wasn't fair. It's unfair. And FIFA were asked about the language thing, and with all the modern technology, surely you can get the exam, which is done online in numerous languages. I'm sure there'll be some app or subtitles or whatever. But having said that, there's a lot of technical stuff that probably AI and probably the language interpreters, won't bring up, particularly when they're in question form, and they are very tricky questions, Pete.
Yeah.
And speaking of questions, we've got one question there. What's that? Yeah, just about the duration. Yeah, it's they've kept the duration, the maximum. Adam, good question. The maximum duration of a rep contract, Adam, is 2 years, and it's remained at that. So that hasn't changed. Yeah. The other bit of news, Pete, just going on because we're not that far away from 3:15, which we'll try and look to finish on. When talking about the agents, Jonathan Barnett has announced his retirement, and I've sort of been in the company. I don't really know Jonathan at all, but he was I don't know whether he still will be part of the board of the Association of Football Agents, but in terms of an agent, I've heard him speak on several occasions at different forums and different webinars and things, and he's built an unbelievable company, hasn't he?
Oh, unbelievable success that he's had when he set up the Stellar Group with David Manasseh, helping establish them as probably the most valuable football agency in the world. I think they were named that by Forbes, and Jonathan himself was named the most powerful sports agent in the world as well. He's probably one of the original super agents. Obviously, that's a tag that's dished out quite a lot now these days. Super agents for the top operators who have all the big players as well. But yeah, he's obviously now turned 74. Decided now to retire. Obviously, they sold Stellar to ICM partners in 2020, but it hasn't really changed the everyday working of Stellar, who are still a huge name in the football agency world. Not just football, they do other sports as well. But he's helped guide the careers of some top players. Probably the most high profile for Jonathan was Gareth Bale. Helped broker that world record then, £85 million move from Tottenham to Real Madrid, which was huge news at the time, a huge move, which for Jonathan and also for Stellar as well. And obviously he was very outspoken because obviously Gareth Bale did come in for a lot of flack during his time in Spain, and Jonathan was very protective of his players and especially Gareth Bale as well. So he was critical of the Spanish media as well. But yeah, big loss to Stellar and the world of football agency, a real pioneer of British agents. There's no doubts about that. And obviously his son already working at Stellar as well, so he will be continuing the name at CAA Stellar as well. So, but yeah, a big influence that he's had on the game in general. Jack Grealish as well, £100 million player, was one of the players that was under his umbrella at Stellar as well.
That Jack Grealish transfer. I mean, you guys, I know you do a brilliant job of finding the information about these transfers before they actually put pen to paper. But the Jack Grealish one, it went, it was very sensitive because he was a marquee player for Villa. He was the sort of poster boy of Villa, wasn't he? And it went so under the radar. It must have been, it's one. I look at that deal and I think, you guys have done a brilliant job there, because the first thing you heard was, here he is with his shirt and the deal's done. And there was nothing in the media. It just went like really under the radar. And I thought, that is absolutely class sort of operating, isn't it?
Well, I think obviously Stellar got a release clause put in his contract when he was at Villa when he signed a new deal. So it was just a matter of Manchester City matching that £100 million release clause that gave them permission to talk to Jack Grealish and get the deal done. And that's why the move happened so quickly as well. So you're working with Stellar, who were keen to get everything done, Manchester City, who are obviously very smart operators as well. So yeah, that deal was probably one of the most straightforward deals. I think when you've got top people working on it, and as you said, was a big deal at the time and still a huge fee that City did spend on Jack Grealish, and just another success story of Stellar and what
Yeah.
they've done over the years with Jonathan Barnett at the helm.
Yeah, and Jonathan, when I went to, I'm part of the AFA, which is the Association of Football Agents, Pete, and Jonathan was on the board of that, and he used to be very, very vociferous about FIFA don't really understand how football agents work. They've never. He used to, the thing he used to say, and look, he's just retired, so let's not get carried away. Hopefully, he'll be still on the board. What he did say was, FIFA haven't ever been to my offices. They have no clue. We're a big organization. We're a big business. We're a big employer. We employ people on all sorts of different levels, and we look after our clients. He was very, very protective of his clients, and also very, very protective of the agent business. And sometimes he would lose his cool with the FA, and you knew. Oh, hang on a sec. He means business. He's a real a firebrand in that. But obviously he was fighting his corner and fighting the agent's corner, and that'll be a sad miss. If he's not around in the agent business, which I presume retirement will mean he'll just help his son, maybe do a bit of mentoring. I don't know. Just sit in the background on a yacht somewhere. That's how I imagine him retiring. Not how I imagine myself retiring, Pete. What about you?
I wouldn't mind if I could afford a yacht. That'd be half the story in the first place, Tony. But there's no water near me either, so I'd have to move to sunnier climes, I think, to have that dream. But yeah, obviously, Jonathan Barnett's been one of the best in the business in the agency world. There's no doubt about that. And as you said, he was very vocal and supportive of his clients, and also, as you said, for supporting the agents who obviously for a long time were getting a bad rep and
Absolutely.
being the easy scapegoats for a number of people for anything that was wrong with football. Agents did get the blame, but I don't think you could point that finger at Jonathan Barnett. He was one of the best operators around, and he will be a huge miss for Stellar going forward as well. But I'm sure they've got plenty of top people there to continue the fine work that he laid the foundations for.
Great stuff. Thanks, Pete. Look, we've got another question from Arten. Thanks for this question. Looking in a long term, how can cultural and traditional aspects affect the development of the Saudi Pro League in terms of bringing new players from Europe? Considering that Saudi brings experienced players, is it likely that they will have pressure on their movements from their wives or partners and children, like it was with Jordan Henderson? And we alluded to this when I was talking about the MLS of the Saudi League. But what are your thoughts on that, Pete?
Yeah, obviously there's been a bit of negative publicity for the Saudi Pro League with the Jordan Henderson move falling short after just 6 months, with the player keen to move back to Europe. He got that move back to Ajax as well, but that wasn't a success story for the Saudi Pro League. There's been
No.
other examples as well. Karim Benzema's struggled as well to settle at Al Nassr. He was seeking a move away as well, so they're not good PR news stories for the Saudi Pro League, who are obviously, I think, going to be big spenders again in the summer transfer window. I do think they will go out there and trying to find some marquee signings. They obviously had a quiet January window. I think they're saving themselves for the summer, but I do think they need to get the structure right as well. So it shouldn't just be the marquee players that they're looking to bring in. Maybe signing some younger players as well to help develop and help improve the league as well. I think that's the only way the Saudi Pro League is going to really become sustainable and become competitive as well.
What I would say, Arten, is that a lot of players that I know like to go to Dubai and places like that in the summer or in the break that they get. They like that sort of Dubai. I don't know what it's like in Saudi. I've never been there, and the same for other countries in that area. But um, if it's so culturally different for the families of these players, and the players don't particularly like it for whatever reason, then you can't stay somewhere where you're not happy. That's what I would say. If you aren't happy and your family aren't happy, it's not a good place to play your best football, then, is it? But it's so important for players to be content and happy and settled in their home life to produce on the pitch. And that's in my opinion. You get a happy player who's happy where he is, content, settled. His family's settled, and then it helps them produce on the pitch. So if those circumstances aren't there, you can throw all the money in the world at it you like, but they won't last long because it'll start to, the friction will start to build and the unhappiness will start to build. So, that's my best answer if that's okay. But Pete, we're going to have to finish. I'll just mention the Football Transfer Forum 11, so FTF 11. We've just announced the dates for it, and it's going to be at the Etihad, Manchester. It's for anyone who's involved in football transfers, scouting, and recruitment. So that's people from clubs, football agents. We get a lot of the businesses, some of the data companies that operate in that space. And it's going to be a special one, this one, because we've got 2 days. We only usually do it over 1 day. So clubs meet agents and companies, and we have a really good speakers. I mean, we've get some of the best speakers in football in this country, and we do get people from abroad as well, which is great. But this time we're going for 2 days. So the first day, which is the 15th of May, will be the women's game day. So we're going to get people involved in the women's game there on the first day. And then the second day, which is the 16th of May, it's the men's game. So, you've got 2 different systems there. I don't know many people in the women's game. So I've got Jo Tung, MBE, who's a top agent in the women's game. And she's got some interesting male clients as well in the men's game. But she's Emma Hayes' agent. She's helping me with the women's game one. And we're hoping to get, some of the sporting directors, general managers, and some of the people increasingly who are working with players in the women's game. So I'm really excited about it, and hopefully, if you're interested, let me know. That's coming off in May, Pete. Unfortunately, Pete, we don't allow journalists in though.
Oh, how could you, Tony?
I might invite you to the night out.
Right, yeah. That'll make up for it, pal. That'll make up for it.
Well, we don't have journalists in just because people are talking about transfers, and anyway, you find it out the minute they leave the room or whatever. But listen, hopefully you've enjoyed that session today. We're going to have another one next month, so it's the first Wednesday. I think it's the 3rd of April. And we've got some guests lined up for next month and the month after. So hopefully we'll see you again. But thanks so much, Pete. I really enjoyed that. Again, time flies, doesn't it, when we're doing these things?
Not a problem, Tony. Really enjoyed it, and hope everybody else enjoyed it as well.
Cheers, mate. See you soon.
See you, Tony. Take care.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.